Well, I see you have arrived. I admire your courage. And who am I? Just think of me as your very own personal ghost host. I'm here to tuck you in tonight. So, lock your windows and doors, look in your closet and under your bed, and hold your blankets tight, and prepare for 6 terrifyingly true ghost stories. Our first story tonight is sure to send a chill up your spine, and probably change how you look at hotel rooms. It's called Ghost Experience in Hotel Turned Me into a Believer.
So this is an experience I had in 2018 when I was a management trainee with an organization, and it entailed a short 1 or 2 week stint across their major offices in different cities. Our office organized for accommodation for us too. For my second stint, I was put in a city where I had never been before and had no friends or acquaintances. So the company booked a hotel close to the office premises. The room was rather big and seemed quite luxurious, albeit a bit old and shabby. What stumped me the most was how economical it was. The first night was uneventful, and for a woman traveling alone for the first time, it felt secure and comfortable. The second night, at about 9:30 p.m., I ordered in, and after finishing my dinner, I went out of my door to place the food trolley for collection by the staff. Just when I turned around to close my door, I saw someone staring at me from the corner of my eye. The person was at the end of the corridor, and it was very dimly lit. Let me add here that only 2 out of the 20 rooms on the floor were occupied, and 10 were being renovated, hence the dim lighting at night. When I turned to look, the person ran out of view towards the elevator. I was creeped out and locked the room and reported this to the reception. Third night, I was talking to my mum on a video call and heard heavy pacing and running at about 10 or 10:30 p.m. My mama heard it too. I sneaked to the peephole and saw no one, but I heard the footsteps right outside my door. Called the reception and they sent someone to check, who reported that there was no one, and I checked their CCTV footage. No one was there. Fourth night, I got a call on the hotel intercom, and when I answered, I heard only heavy breathing and low growling noises. This continued another 2 times before I called the reception again to raise a complaint. They checked their call panel records and said I had not received calls from any current hotel guest or staff lines. I checked again next morning just to be sure, and they showed how the system is automated, and no one can tamper with it. It showed no incoming or outgoing calls from my room. Fifth night, heard a constant knocking on the wall behind the bed, and it moved across the room, basis where I was standing. This creeped me out much more, and as someone diagnosed with hyperanxiety and depression, it felt like I was losing my mind, and I got an anxiety attack. I ran out of my room to the reception, 2 floors below, and the manager on duty calmed me down, and I was extremely upset. I questioned everyone around, and none of the staff said anything and said it was strange such things were happening. Later, a woman from my hometown, who was currently employed there, accompanied me to a new room they assigned me to. She told me in private that the floor I was on was sealed for 5 years and had recently been opened. Rumor has it that some old hotel staff had SA'd a woman, and she was unalived in the struggle. The administration covered it up and paid off the perpetrator and family of the victim, and sold this property to the current owners. Since then, people have reported multiple occurrences on that floor. Also, these were major events. Some other small things happened, like the feeling of being watched constantly, cold spots, and feelings of nausea and panic. I checked out promptly the next morning and got another hotel, paid from my pocket, and have since then been extremely scared and anxious to be alone in any hotel room.
Wow, I can't say I blame you. Anyway, on with our next one. It comes all the way from Australia. It's called The Ghost Cyclist, Cranbourne, Australia.
This is my story of contact with life after death. I am a 45-year-old woman in Victoria, Australia. I was driving through Cranbourne on my way to Devon Meadows probably between 4 and 5 a.m. sometime in winter 2005. The morning was a very foggy one. I was on the South Gippsland Highway, and I could barely see. Then I spotted a cyclist some way in front of me. I slammed on the brakes, but my car didn't look like it was going to stop in time. As I drew closer, it started appearing to me like the cyclist was going backwards. Then it became evident that he was transparent. He ended up sitting on my bonnet by the time my car came to a stop. It looked like he was made out of a kind of golden light. He stretched his hand towards me through my intact windshield. He seemed to want me to take it, and I did. It felt spongy and strange, like nothing else I've touched. After a moment, he vanished. This seemed to invite other ghosts in. I was haunted for the rest of the morning. I saw a disembodied torso appear in a window, terrifying me, and also a ghost man with a ghost dog on a veranda. The ghost man was an older one who wore a white undershirt-type singlet. I believe the ghost dog was mostly white with some black patches. They have been seen by at least one other person that I know of. I searched TAC records and reached out to Cranbourne locals via Facebook, looking to find out as much as I can. I finally traced the cyclist encounter to an accident which occurred at about 5 a.m. on July 2, 1990. The victim was 25, due to turn 26 in August. His name was Jason. He was riding his bike to work, having lost his license, at Coles warehouse in Hampton Park very early in the morning, was hit from behind by a red Ford, though some locals seemed to think it was a truck. He was rather a lost soul and had a sad background, but did have some good friends. He spent a lot of time on his own despite this. When I met him, I felt like he wanted my comfort and maybe my help. There was a lonely, sad feeling about him. One of Jason's friends kindly gave me information about Jason's life and death, as well as giving me his identity. Other Cranbourne locals have also assisted me in piecing this together. It is the only cyclist fatality that ever occurred in all of Casey at that time of day, according to TAC records. The records were not accurate with respect to Jason's age, though. I know that because I've seen a photo of his grave, which I've since visited. His friend also told me that TAC just use initial estimates from the accident scenes to record the age of victims. I've been told that others have seen my ghost cyclist as a rider in a fog who then vanished. I believe he probably reached out to me because we had certain commonalities, on top of my being there on a foggy winter early morning much like the one he passed away on. Also, I was 26 when I met him, nearly the same age he was when he passed. We were about 15 years apart in age and it may even have been the 15-year anniversary of his passing when I met him.
Well, so much for having a relaxing drive in the fog. Next we have one from an OP that lived in a haunted trailer as a kid. We call this one the Haunted Trailer in Southwest Virginia from 1984.
As a child, my family moved around a lot. I never knew why until I was an adult and realized it had much to do with my mother's ADHD. Maybe she was running from something. My older sister says she was protecting us. Anyway, we moved nearly 30 times before I graduated high school. In many of the homes we lived in, I saw things that only I could see. This one place is among the most remarkable. I was 14. It was 1984 and summertime. My family had just moved into a single-wide trailer in Large Trailer Park. Immediately, I began to see and hear things, and it took me a few days to realize they were paranormal. I would lay in my bed at night and hear loud growls coming from under my bed. From my room, I would also hear my mother in the kitchen and smell food cooking in the early hours, pans clanking and such, and I go into the kitchen and the lights are off and no one is there. This happened many times, and everyone in the house says they experienced this at least once. My mother would wake us up in the middle of the night with the door wide open, screaming, "Leave us alone! Please just leave!" This happened a lot. I remember my aunt coming over to take care of us because my mom was in the hospital, and she made us all sleep together in the living room because she was scared. The most terrifying experience was early one morning. I was wide awake and laying in the bed with the room door wide open. Everyone was asleep, and I could see down the hall into the kitchen. I saw a short, dark figure with a hunchback rise off the kitchen table and slowly walk down the hall toward my door. When it reached my door, it stared at me briefly and turned away. I was terrified, gasping for breath. It was just dark with no features. I believed it to be a woman, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we moved shortly after. This is the only house we lived in that everyone saw things. Usually it was just me.
That was a trailer? Sounds more like a house of horrors to me. Our next story is about a dude that had a lot of experiences growing up. We call this one Paranormal Experiences in Mount Washington in Pittsburgh.
Summer of '90, my brother was attending the Art Institute of Pittsburgh, and he invited me to stay the week at his house on Oneida Street in Mount Washington. He had 3 roommates that also were staying at this house. On the first day I arrived with my dad. My brother tells me that he is trying out for a heavy metal band to become their lead drummer. He tells us he's been listening to a tape cassette, electric guitar acoustics only, over the past month, so he can learn the songs and play along on the drums. During the 2 months, he practiced every night and played the cassette tape front and back. One night, my brother noticed that his radio would turn on by itself and start playing the cassette tape. Also, it would fast forward and rewind on its own. He told us that there's weird noises on the cassette tape that was not there when he received it. He wanted to know if we were interested in listening. My dad and me were intrigued and wanted to hear the tape for ourselves. My brother hit the play button and I could hear the guitar playing loudly for a few minutes, and then it started to fade into the background. I could barely hear it. Then suddenly, I started hearing loud growling noises and something angrily yelling or talking. Sounded like it was talking backwards. While I was listening, I started getting chills. I've never heard anything like this ever. I looked at my dad and shook my head in disbelief and asked him what he thought. He said whatever it is, it sounded very evil and angry. He told my brother to either give the tape back to his musician buddy or burn it. After we finished listening to the cassette tape, my brother then began to tell us stories on what he and his roommates have been experiencing since they moved into the house. He said they would hear footsteps going up and down the stairs and down the hallway. Items would be moved or go missing in their bedrooms and bathrooms. TVs would turn on and off by itself. Doors would open on their own. My brother and his other roommate both had drum sets, and they would hear something tapping on the drums in the middle of the night. My brother's girlfriend stayed over one night, and in the morning, while my brother was in the shower, his girlfriend ran frantically out of the bedroom and into the shower with him. My brother was startled and asked what's wrong. She told him the bed started shaking and then elevated off the floor, and it terrified her. He also told us that a week prior, one of his roommates ran out of his bedroom downstairs, looked pale as a ghost, and out of the house. He left his belongings and never returned to the house. The old roommate never contacted anyone to tell them what happened. After my brother told my dad and me all these stories, I had to decide on whether I wanted to stay the week or drive back home with my dad to Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Being 14 years old, I didn't want to look like a wimp or scaredy cat, so I decided to stay for the week with my brother. Mentally, I was trembling and terrified. On the first night, I was absolutely terrified and did not want to go to bed that evening. I thought about pulling an all-nighter just to make it through the night. My brother had class the next morning, so we had to get up early to catch the bus and head into the city. I had a blanket and pillow and laid on the floor next to my brother's bed. Around 3:30 a.m. or so, I got the chills really bad, and I felt like something was watching me. I heard something in the hallway, creaking footsteps. Suddenly, the bedroom door flies open, and the 3 large window blinds flew up, smacked the ceiling, and then came back down. I jumped up off the floor in a fighting stance, scared as hell, and yelled, "Come on! You want a piece of me?" My brother woke up and said, "What the hell was that?" I told him what happened, and he just said, "Don't worry about it. It won't hurt you." I stood there staring at the open door and down the hallway in disbelief. At that time, I was second-guessing my decision to stay and was thinking about calling my dad to pick me up, but it was like 1 hour and 30 minutes away. I sat back down on the floor and just sat up against the bed until daylight. I remember hopping in the shower and just thinking, how am I going to make it through the rest of the week? On occasion, I do remember hearing noises at night, footsteps/creaking noises, while I sat in the living room and watched TV. After that incident, the spirit left me alone, well, at least to my knowledge. I don't know if it accepted me or if it was bored with me. I was hoping to find others that may have stayed, lived, or rented at this house and hear about their experiences or encounters.
Now wait one damn minute. Why oh why do people always jump to it must be evil when it comes to Ghost? I mean, maybe he just wasn't into heavy metal music. Did anyone think of that? Maybe the spirit was more of a country and western sort of ghost? We have one from a guy that lived in a haunted mobile home. We call it Ghost Outside My Door.
I was living in a mobile home with a friend of mine in 2001. I had moved in within the last few months. My room was in the back of the home at the end of a hallway. My friend usually went out on weekends and didn't get home until late. But when he did get home, he would almost always walk back and knock on my door to see if I was up so he could tell me about his outing. One Saturday night, I was in my room watching TV and didn't feel like talking because I was really into what I was watching. So when I heard the door open and footsteps in the kitchen, I made up my mind to pause what I was watching and just stay quiet and act like I was already asleep when he came back and knocked on the door. After a minute or so I heard him walking down the hallway towards my room, so I just sat still waiting for him to knock. When the footsteps stopped outside the door, I could hear him breathing but there was no knock. I figured he was just standing there listening for me to make a sound indicating I was still awake so he could knock and tell me about his night. But he just stood outside the door breathing for about a minute until the sound of breathing stopped. I was expecting to hear him walk back to the living room and turn on the TV as usual, but there was nothing. No sound at all. I was beginning to get a little spooked at this point. Either he was still standing outside the door being as quiet as he could, or I just heard something terrifying. After 5 minutes or so of no sound, I finally got the courage to open the door and find out what was going on. As soon as I opened the door, I noticed that he wasn't there. There were no lights on and no indication that he was there at all. I looked out to see if his car was there, and it wasn't. I knew it was impossible for him to go back out and leave without me hearing him, so now I could feel my heart pounding. I went back to my room and closed the door. I was no longer concerned with the program I was watching. Instead, I was just waiting for him to get home so I could find out if he somehow managed to leave again without me hearing him. That was the only logical explanation for what I heard. But when he finally did arrive, he told me he was still more than an hour drive from home when this happened. I had a few more strange experiences in the home before I moved out, but this was the first and scariest of them all.
Hey, I just realized something. This is the second story of the night that involves a mobile home or trailer. I thought people that lived there normally saw UFOs, not ghosts. Next we have one from Sweden. It's called The Night We Had an Experience.
It was me and 2 friends back in 2010, and we were in our late teens. It was the middle of the night, and we had been doing something I can't remember, but we were sober. We walked home, and naturally, the friend who lived closest turned off first. About 10 minutes later, we got a call from him asking us to come to his house. He had heard some noises and thought someone might be in the house. When we arrived, he was standing on the road outside, waiting for us. To give some context, this guy didn't believe in anything supernatural at the time, so he was pretty sure it was an actual person in the house. We started searching the entire house, closets, under beds, everywhere, but found nothing. We were a bit spooked, but concluded that there was no one in the house. So, we decided to make the best of it and play a horror game. We sat down in a room upstairs. They lay down on the bed, and I sat down at the computer, which was right next to the door. Before I even started the game, I heard someone tiptoeing outside the door. I jumped up to open it, but hesitated at the last second with my hand on the handle. As I stood there hesitating, someone on the outside pulled the handle, causing my hand to move up and down several times. I reacted by grabbing the handle with both hands and pushing it up as hard as I could, holding the door shut. I told my friends to get up, and on the count of 3, we ran out. We ran downstairs, grabbed something to defend ourselves with, and searched the whole house again. Still, we found nothing. We kept searching for maybe 30 minutes. But as the sun began to rise, we gave up and laid down on the couch to watch a movie instead. The sun shone through the upstairs window, and from the couch, we could see the wall via the staircase. As we were lying there, I saw the shadow of a figure, what I would call a man, walking back and forth upstairs. But at that moment, I realized there was no point. There was nowhere for anyone to hide up there, and no way for anyone to get there from outside. So, I didn't say anything to my friends, and we continued watching the movie.
So, you hear tons of unexplained noises, and your solution is to play a horror video game. That's sorta like playing a game of Resident Evil during a zombie apocalypse. That was some scary stuff tonight, wasn't it? But do you know what is not scary? Hitting like, subscribe, and sharing this video. It'll really help us keep the ghosts at bay. However, if you prefer podcast, then you're in luck, because we also release our videos in podcast form on Spotify. And of course, if any of you have a story to share, then by all means, drop me a line in the comments. But I do want to thank you for stopping by, and I hope the stories we told won't be giving you too many bad dreams. But if they do, then maybe you shouldn't run from them. After all, sometimes it's better to embrace your nightmares.